Welcome to a special bonus episode of At the Table. It's called Grabbing Coffee. This is where we sit down for 30-minute one-on-one conversations with some of the most inspiring and fascinating individuals in our community. Just like you would with a friend over a cup of coffee, we'll dive into their personal stories, challenges, and triumphs, getting to know the person behind the public persona. So grab a cup, pull up a chair, because this week I'm grabbing coffee with Carissa Gillespie. Carissa Gillespie is a proud product parent and teacher in District 209. In addition to being a member of Proviso 209 United, she is also an active member of Grace Central Church in Westchester. Miss Gillespie has been a sponsor, mentor, and presenter for a variety of programs throughout the Chicagoland area and served as an educational liaison in several area nonprofits during the 3-week Proviso Teachers Strike of 2022. It was in this role that she helped organize parents, teachers, and other stakeholders in setting up tutoring, community service activities, and safe zones for students affected by the strike. Through her work with Proviso United 209 and within the community, Ms. Gillespie hopes she can help to educate and engage parents, students, and the community in how to build and sustain policies and procedures dedicated to exposing and resolving the root causes of what is causing failure within our schools. She's dedicated to making sure that all educational stakeholders have a voice in how our schools run, what policies and procedures are needed, and how resources are allocated to support students both academically and mentally. Carissa, hey, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for grabbing a cup with me.
Thank you. I had to go grab my cup.
Hey, that's what's good. That's what's good. So let's start from the past and work our way to the future, right? So
Okay.
the past. So you grew up in District 209?
So I'm originally from the South Side of Chicago.
South Side.
South Side. 63rd and Low, Robert Taylor Homes. My great grandparents were part of the Great Migration from the South, and my great grandfather had served in World War I. And when they moved north, they landed in Maywood, as a lot of people from Mississippi and down south did. And one of the lures for them in Maywood was the ability to buy property. And my great grandfather worked for the American Can Company, and so naturally, their children and family planted roots in Maywood. So when we permanently left the South Side, Maywood was the natural draw. It was where my great grandparents were and had property. And so we moved to Maywood. And so I've been in Maywood since I was maybe about 8 or 9 years old. I went to Lincoln Elementary School, District 89. I graduated from Proviso East. I'm a pirate. I always tell my students that I teach red and I bleed blue. And so I'm just, I really love the community and the school district that I am a product of.
Yeah. How'd you get into education as a vocation?
I was that kid that, everybody else was playing, house or hide and seek. I always wanted to play school. And of course, I was always the teacher. And I just, there was just always something. And it was not so much teaching, but it was writing for me. I loved reading, loved writing. And so when I graduated from high school, I actually went to Triton College and, tooled around a little bit with journalism, went to Columbia College. And by the time I left Columbia College with a bachelor's, I had kind of decided that it wasn't going to be writing for me. It was going to be teaching for me because, I was still in touch with teachers at Proviso that truly just transformed my life. I like to say that the teachers in my high school experience at Proviso East actually saved my life. I came from a family that was, there was this cycle of teen pregnancy, single mothers, drug addiction. And so it was a cycle that I was actually on track to continue. I entered Proviso East High School as a pregnant 14-year-old freshman. And when I got there, The first 3 periods of the day, I had teachers that, one told me, I don't have a desk big enough to fit you. Another teacher told me, why don't you just go home, have your baby, get on welfare. They were very, straightforward about it. And I wanted to do that by lunchtime. I wanted to do that, me and my swole belly. And I called my grandmother crying. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to drop out. And she's like, no, you're not. I don't care what they say to you. You're going to continue. So by the end of the day, I met, and then there on out, I met teachers that truly just, didn't look at me as a failure. They said, yeah, you've got obstacles and you've made some obstacles, but they're not obstacles you can't overcome. And not only did these teachers give me words of encouragement, they gave me actions to show that they were, behind me, whether it be, oh, you don't have a babysitter, bring your child to school, we'll figure it out. Oh, you don't have money for registration, because we were on welfare, we got food stamps. Then they would give me money. It was really, and when I think about it, it's those teachers, it's that sense of community where this is a young lady who made a mistake, but we're not going to throw her out. We're not going to throw her away. We're going to lift her up and move her out. And so when I think back to those teachers, that's a lot of the reason why I wanted to become a teacher, because I wanted to be someone's Mr. Salati or someone's Miss Wars, those teachers that truly just, changed my life, saved my life.
Yeah. For me, that was Mr. Moore. I went to Emerson in Maywood.
Yes.
Mr. Moore, he looked like Santa Claus. Big, bushy, white beard. He came to school on a motorcycle. He thought it was the coolest guy on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But he ignited within me a passion for reading that I've never forgotten that gift.
It's a teacher. I can't tell you who the board members were. I can't tell you a lot of times who my principal was, but I can tell you who my English teachers were. I can tell you who my math teachers were. I can tell you who the security people were, the custodians. I can tell you those people.
The people on the front lines with you every day.
Every single day.
Yeah. So after you decided education was your vocation, how did you end up back in Proviso District?
So I was teaching at Forest Park Middle School, and that was a great experience, but I also knew that it wasn't for me. And it wasn't because it was Forest Park or anything like that. It was just that I was teaching 6th grade, and I was just like, ooh, this is not for me. Because 6th grade, they're still somebody's babies, and they're still, trying to figure it out. And I got a sense that they didn't need me. They needed a teacher, but not necessarily a Miss Gillespie. And so I started applying. I was actually accepting a job in Rochester, New York as a teacher. And my oldest daughter was graduating from Proviso East. She was graduating from Proviso. She had transferred to West. And so Alexis Wallace, who's the principal at the time, wonderful woman. She truly embodied Proviso West. She called me up and she said, yeah, your daughter told me you're thinking about moving and teaching. I was like, yeah. She's like, no, you're not. You're coming home. And I said, well, Miss Wallace, I'm a pirate. And she said, you're coming home. So I had put in an application and had been interviewed by all 3 schools, because at the time PMSA was opening as well.
What year was this?
This was like 2000. I had been subbing for the district on and off since about like 2001. So I want to say around 2004 or 5, I just made the decision. And when it came down to choosing a school, it was just something about, even though I love Proviso East, it was something about Miss Wallace and her being the type of administrator that mentored her teachers and encouraged her teachers. And it kind of like reminded me of high school again, where I'd be going into this, but I'd be going into it with someone who was looking out for me and making sure that I was looking out for those students. So I chose West, and I've been at Proviso West ever since.
Oh, wow. And so when you started, who was the superintendent?
When I started, here's the crazy thing. When I started, Proviso was in this cycle of, it's like this cycle of having a superintendent that you're paying and having one that you're working. Because it was always like a crazy rotation. Like one was being like, either like taken out of their contract, and then you brought an interim in. So there was a time when, when I first started, where we had literally a superintendent on the payroll that was actually the superintendent, and then a superintendent that was on the payroll that wasn't there anymore, but you had to pay out the contract. So for a long time, we had that rotation. And then we had, oh my goodness, we've had so many. But the first and honestly, that type of stuff, I heard it, but I didn't bother with it, because my thought was, grown people gonna do what grown people gonna do, and that's what they do at the top. And it's not touching me in my classroom, and it's not touching my students. So you guys hash it out at the top. When I first kind of started looking at who's the superintendent, how they're running the district, and the one who was the one there that was most consistent, it was Mr. Lipka was there, and then Nettie Collins-Hart. There was somebody in between, but then he was gone. But then it was Nettie Collins-Hart, and then after Dr. Collins-Hart, it was Jesse Rodriguez, and now we have the current superintendent.
And so in the time of Rodriguez coming on board, was that under the tenure of Proviso Together that he came on, or did he predate Proviso Together?
I think they came first, and he came right after, because he was like one of their the newest hire. So it was all kind of like
2016,
yeah, and it was all kind of like this change together, and it was exciting because we had this new board, we had this new superintendent, and we really saw a lot of change in that time. It could be scary because you've got two entities kind of changing at the same time, your board and your superintendent. But at first, it was truly like we were really progressing. Like I didn't always agree with Dr. Rodriguez. He was actually the superintendent where I would start coming to board meetings, and I had moved back into the district. So now I'm a taxpayer. And I would, come to, if I didn't like something or felt like, hey, this might be moving resources in the wrong way. I would come, I would speak. I was also around that time, I started my tenure as a union representative. So I was able to look at things in a different way, and how they were, affecting, teachers and staff and students. And so, though I didn't always agree with Dr. Rodriguez, but he was always open to sit down and talk. And there was this openness with this new board that, if as a taxpayer and as a long-term teacher, that I can come and talk to you. And
that was new, right?
That was
different than any board or a superintendent besides the one directly preceding him.
Well, let me tell you why it was kind of it may have been new, but I think for me, I guess I didn't pay attention to, this is how politics work. My thing was, hey, I got a problem. You might be able to help me. Let me talk to you. So I never had a problem with calling a board member, or, even though some people would look at me like, you did that? That's not what you do. And I'm like, well, that's what we should do. I should be able to call people that I've given my vote to or given my support to, or just as a teacher, if I've shown you that I care about these schools and I care about the students, then you should care about my voice when I call you and say, hey, I'm not really, either explain it to me and tell me where you're going with this, what's the plan, or hear me out. And so that's one of the things I always respected Dr. Rodriguez for. And then that particular configuration of the board for was that I did feel like they would hear out the community. They would hear out the students. They would hear out teachers and staff. And it wasn't punitive. It wasn't a tax. It was, let's sit down and figure this out.
Yeah. And can you tell me a bit about where you think it all started to fall apart? Because at the time that you're talking about, at this point, you have a united board, like all 7 members were of the same slate, right? By this point, right? All 7 of them
I think so.
together.
I think so.
From Carissa Kelly, the oldest, longest serving person on that board, to Rodney and them, the more recent people on the board. All of them are part of that same slate.
Right.
You got Rodriguez in place, and he's doing great, and everybody's excited about the positive changes happening in the district. Where did it all fall apart? Like, can you talk a bit about that?
You know, and I'm gonna preface this with because I'm constantly reflecting on that same idea. When did it fall apart? Mm-hmm. Because one, I always reflect on it because I never want to put blame on someone or some particular body where the blame doesn't need to be. Mm-hmm. But also, as someone who's currently running a slate of candidates, I want to make sure that I'm reflecting on that, because I want to know, where did it turn left with this group when it was going well, mm-hmm. to try to avoid those pitfalls. And so, in my opinion, I think it just went left when the configuration of the board changed, the relationships of the board changed, and then there was this. It just seemed like all at once people on the board that were cordial and able to work together were not. Mm-hmm. And then you started really hearing, and I think this is just really unpopular to say. And you know, one of the things, and I've been called a lot of things by, you know, people that look like me, because I don't mind calling it out and calling it for what it is. But we started talking a lot about race, and race is always going to be an issue. But we went from trying to figure out how to be one proviso to, you're doing this or saying this because this is a Black superintendent, or we're talking about, you know, systemic racism, and systemic racism exists in every facet of life. But as I look at things, and I'm an educator, an African-American educator, I'm also looking at it and saying, well, the leaders, the educational decision makers in the district that I'm in, where you're talking about all this, look like me. So what's going on here? Are we using smoke screens, or is this really happening? Mm-hmm. So I think that when your focuses turn away from the students, then everything went left, because now it seemed like it wasn't about students, it's about one person or a board majority, or, you know, it's always kind of been contentious between, you know, admin and teachers, but now it's being broken down even more by, you know, race. But then there's this contradiction, because I can get on board with, I believe that we need more representation in education, most definitely. I also know that some of the teachers that saved my life did not necessarily share my culture. Mm-hmm. As a long-term teacher in this district, what pains me, and I don't want to choke up now, is that because I'm asking questions, and I'm asking questions because I'm concerned about Black and brown students, because that's who I teach, that people that look like me want to attack my Blackness. I wear that every day. My dedication
You're
to
seeing
my
your earrings. Which I love, by the way. They're fire.
Yeah. Because I believe that Black students need certain things, and we should be providing those things. But I also believe, as an educator, I can't pick and choose who I'm teaching. You can't pick and choose as representatives of a district. You can't pick and choose which group of students you're going to service. Because in my classroom, I don't have only Black students. In my classroom, I have a variety of students. And you're not giving me the resources as my educational leaders to provide for any of those students. So when I think about when things went left, and they've been going left, it's going to board meetings, and the board meetings look more like Jerry Springer episodes than business meetings or meetings of the mind. When students and again, board members and the superintendent are not in our buildings every day. We are in the buildings every day. When I see my students not getting services, that's a problem. And it should be a problem for anybody sitting on that board. It should be a problem. And it angers me that we have board members that are more passionate about sticking up for one person that you have not evaluated, but not for the thousands of students that walk our halls and walk our streets. That's a problem.
Yeah. Can you go a little bit into more about how the recent controversies and discord in the at the board, at the administrative level, how's that affected teaching? Like, what's teaching like right now in the school?
So I've been in all three buildings, and the culture and feeling of school. I have students that, this is the last 2 years are the first year where we lock our doors consistently, where we spent the beginning of this past school year with no teachers in classrooms. Yet you have, educational leadership saying we're overstaffed, but we're not seeing it. We're not feeling it. Teaching is different because it's not collaborative. We have hemorrhaged a lot of our long-term veteran, tenured, quality teachers. And I know that one of the narratives that the board likes to spew or put out is that, well, these teachers don't come to work. We live in an age of COVID. We have a lot of violence that has occurred in our schools. You get teachers and staff people that get hurt. And quite honestly, when you give people days, if you have days, you are allowed to use them. But that still does not, teachers calling in does not excuse the fact that we have hemorrhaged teachers, not because of, oh, there's a teacher shortage. I didn't say teacher shortage. I said hemorrhaged. Our teachers have gone to other places and they love to say, these teachers, these teachers, these teachers. I'm not doing that narrative anymore because these teachers that left our buildings, these administrators, that were pushed out, they're now at places that are performing schools. Oak Park River Forest has benefited from several of our counselors and social workers and teachers. Hinsdale has our former principal, Patrick Hardy, out there. Our teachers are not going places and floundering. They're going to places and getting scooped up.
How long was Hardy with the Proviso for? I was doing some research. I was looking at like the Illinois report cards for the schools, and I feel like I always saw his name at the top, no matter what year I looked at.
I think I want to say 4 years. I think 4 years. He did a lot. Again, and I say this because I think it's important to say that I didn't always agree with Hardy, because I think 100% agreement is unnatural. You're not going to have that. But you give credit where credit is due. He changed the culture of the buildings, where you once had, communities like Forest Park that notoriously would send their kids to private school instead of going to Proviso East. And you had, now you had Forest Park on board with, hey, this is a school. Proviso East is a viable option for us. St. Joe's closed. I think that was that 2018, 2019?
That was actually more recent. That is they closed 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Proviso East and Proviso West put on wonderful open houses to bring those families in. And at the time, those families wanted to come. So, you had people in place that could put their egos aside and say, how do we make our schools viable options? Because you're going to have people that send their kids to private school, and that's your prerogative. But for those that can't, for those that don't want to, our schools need to be viable options.
Yeah. Last question for you. Can you tell me about your hopes looking forward to the future? What's the change you want to see in 209?
The change that I would truly love to see, I know people are waiting with bated breath for me to say, get rid of the superintendent. The change I want to see is I want the educational leaders, the financial leaders for the district, the Board of Education, to be held accountable, to be transparent, and go back to communicating with stakeholders, the community. I would love to see more work being done with our feeder schools.
I'm going to give you a solo for this.
Thank you. More work, becoming more of a village. We all love to throw out that it takes a village, but we continue to work in silos. And, I'm not even going to blame this board and this superintendent for that. I'm throwing that out there and saying that we got to stop saying it takes a village and then continue to work in silos. And so my hope is that we start taking that approach where we are talking to our feeder schools. My hope is that moving forward, our local, mayors, and many of them have, stepped up and stepped in, because I know, I'm learning that this politic thing is tricky and nobody wants to step on anybody's toes. But you're part of the community. These schools are your community. When you're trying to, sell houses or bring people into your communities, well, they're looking at the schools. So we all have to make sure that our schools are viable options. And so what gives me hope is that people are paying attention. And, it'd be easy for me to say, vote for this. I just tell people, I know who I'm standing behind. I want you to research everybody that is sitting in the seats or wants to sit in the seats, and make your decisions that way. And don't, and sometimes we make our decisions because it's what I've always done. Business as usual has our schools drowning. We got to start being smarter, and we got to start valuing our voice and our votes more. because our schools and our communities depend on it.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Do you have anything you want to plug before we sign off here?
Well, I'm running a slate.
Feel free. This is your platform right now.
So thank you. So one of the things that I don't like politics, and people keep saying you're in politics now. My time is valuable. My voice is valuable. And I truly am passionate about these schools because these schools saved my life. And I want these schools to continue saving kids' lives in our district. And it bothers me right now with where we are, but it's not where we have to be all the time. And one of the reasons I took a step away from the union and decided, how can I as a community member try to attempt to make a change? Because I'm going to the board meeting speaking, I'm not being heard. I'm being ridiculed, I'm being lied on. I'm being called a traitor to my race by some people because I want to educate all of our students, Black and brown. I support this slate, Sandra Hickson, Jenny Barbahan, and David Ocampa, because for me, they represent everything that I would want in board members, focused on people and not politics. Sandra has board experience. She's also worked as a long-term sub at Proviso. So she's seen this. It's not hearsay or people coming back and telling her this stuff. This is stuff that she has experienced being in the buildings. Jenny Barbahan, because a lot of people want to talk about, these Forest Park people, and we don't want these, white people taking over our schools. Jenny Barbahan is a mother from Forest Park, but her child goes to Proviso East. She is a white parent whose child is graduating from Proviso East. She didn't fly away. She didn't, I'm going to go private. No, I'm going to send my student, my child, because I believe in these schools. And not only that, she's been active on the Proviso East PAC, as well as a band parent. David Ocampa has small children. And he has been open, and he's got a background in business and, financial analyst. And he stepped up and looked at things and said, I love this community, and I want to get these schools ready for those of us that love our homes, love this community, and have small children, that we want these schools to be viable for these students right now and for our kids coming up and in, as well as making sure that the resources are equal and equitable and spent wisely. You cannot ask taxpayers to trust you when we have culinary classes who just got food and resources in February. But every month, you're chatting and chewing. Make it make sense. It doesn't. It does not. Students come first. Students come first, and that's why I support this slate, because we believe in procedures and policies that are student-focused, not adult-focused. This has to stop. And it stops April 4th with you making the right decision. Not business as usual, business to move us forward.
Carissa, I want to thank you so much for your time. Please don't log off after I do my sign off. I'd love to chat with you for a quick second before you leave.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
So that's a wrap for this week's episode of Grabbing Coffee. I really hope you enjoyed this intimate conversation and got to know our guest, Carissa Gillespie, a little bit better. If you want to hear more from our guest, be sure to look into her slate of candidates. She's very passionate about. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and collectivistmedia.org for updates and more information about the change makers and issues we're highlighting on the show. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube and click the bell that's somewhere, generally speaking, in this down area here, so you can get notified every time we post a new episode. And that's about it. Equilab